y'all think too small, I got big dreams. You just starting, I'm way ahead at the end scenes. Started reading and dodging all of the quick schemes. Money like your Spotify, boy, I got 10 streams. Be real big, I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids.
Hey, I'm Daniel.
I'm Sara.
And this is the Dealmakers Podcast, where we talk about acquisitions that struggle to close or fail to close, and the red flags and lessons that we can take away from those deals so that you can have an easier time getting to the closing table. Today we have Tait, CEO of Decimal, the fastest growing accounting business in the U.S., maybe the world, probably the world.
I don't know. I'll take it all.
We can make the claim. Man, I'm so excited to have this conversation. We had such a great talk before. We were in the same space in like that 2019, like pre-COVID, going into COVID, and I think we shared some great stories. So, Decimal, man, I'm so excited to hear more about you, your origin, Decimal's origin, and everything you have to share today. So, yeah, what can you tell us about you? Tell us where you came from.
Daniel and Sara, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. My team is going to laugh when they hear this because my origin story involves something I say repeatedly because it makes everybody chuckle. I started my career, I'm a recovering attorney. And after leaving the great profession of law, which they make you continually pay for even when you're not practicing, I decided to get into tech startups. And so I've spent the last 10, 12 years here in Indianapolis building and starting tech companies. And Decimal is my third company. And I started it with my co-founder, Jacob Cloran. And what we had ultimately decided was that there are a bunch of unique facets to the book. I call it operational accounting, but bookkeeping, tax, bill pay, all the things businesses have to do to succeed. Things that are traditionally not thought of very highly in accounting firms maybe are thrown in and talked about, hey, I want to build my CAS practice, but I'm totally going to put my worst people on it, so let's go. And so we ultimately loved the repetitiveness of it, the fact that people had to do it. And so we started Decimal as a tech-enabled services business back in January of 2020. And kind of like you said, we have grown astronomically. We have added over 650 businesses as Decimal clients, and our current employee count is about 82 or 83 all around the world. We have people in 26 states, 5 countries, all different time zones. But ultimately, we started Decimal to really try to take this industry and lead it into what I think is the next phase of the business. And so that's kind of where we are. That's a very brief origin story, but we love the space. We love accounting, bookkeeping, tax. God, I never thought I'd say that, but it's awesome.
You have to be a recovering lawyer to say that with a straight face. Trust me. It's
Oh, yeah. Well, I was in sales too. So it's,
And CAS accounting is such an interesting term.
Client Accounting Services, CAS, is a type of outsourced accounting that helps businesses manage their finances and make informed decisions. KS firms can provide a range of services, including bookkeeping, accounts payable and receivable, payroll processing, cash flow management, and bill payment, just to name a few.
So CAS, Client Accounting Services, Client Advisory Services, Client Advisory Accounting, or Accounting Advisory Services. Some firms consider that to be like fractional CFO and like some like advisory coaching. I've heard some call like any bookkeeping and payroll CAS services. So I think it's exciting. I mean, we haven't gotten a new discipline in accounting in a long time, right? So, but what does CAS accounting mean to you at Decimal?
To us, what we considered is bookkeeping, operational help for businesses, like helping them pay their bills, do payroll, invoicing, etc. And then I would say lower level tax for smaller businesses. For small businesses, tax is an operational extension. Once you get bigger and more complex, it starts to become a strategic initiative. We do the operational extension for small businesses. So we are purely bookkeeping. We don't do CFO services. In fact, it's one of the big differentiators that we have is we actually partner with dozens, I think actually almost 100 fractional CFO shops and accounting firms, where we say, hey, we're going to send you the biggest tax clients. We're going to send you the fractional CFO work. And we want to build a community around that.
Decimal has such a unique positioning. I first came across Decimal as the startup that I was at. I've somehow ended up with the job of analyzing our competitors. So I had the competitive analysis sheet, and Decimal was on there. I was snooping. I was looking into it. I think I went through the sales process. Um, but I was so captivated by what you guys were doing because it was different. It was different from what we were doing and how we were approaching, even though we were, attacking the same problems. You guys had a different approach. Obviously, the company I was at still going. You guys are doing amazingly. So obviously, there's multiple paths to success. But what was it about Decimal that, like, why did Decimal start, and why did you guys choose the path you chose?
Ultimately, I'm one of those founders that started a business because I had a problem and I wanted to solve it better than other people solved it for me.
Mhm.
At my past companies, the operational accounting, whether it was hiring a controller, outsourcing to the top cloud accounting firms in the country, it was painful. And we knew that we could do better because truly, you have to do this as a business, but you hate it. I always joke the worst three things about running a company are HR, IT, and accounting. When you become big enough, law is number four very easily. But those are the things that they don't make you feel like you're moving your company forward. They make you feel like you're moving backwards because there's no neutral in running a business. And so for us, we've always taken an operations first approach. Every business, every industry is truly unique. Even when we have dozens of law firms that are clients today, we understand why they're different as a business, what they need to operate, what info they need on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, annual, and making sure that they have that. And then also, it's interesting because coming from law, there are a lot of similarities between law and accounting.
Yeah.
One of the bad similarities is as a professional services industry, neither do great client service. Client service is actually pretty horrendous industry-wide in both. People do initiatives on why we're going to be great at it, but they never actually care. I can't tell you how many times and not my lawyers today, but past lawyers at past companies, I have to email them and say, hey, what's going on with this? Where are we on this? Why am I not getting an update? I've been waiting weeks. What's going on? And then 4 days later, I get a response to something that felt pretty immediate to me. So that type of also being very client experience focused and building your margins around that. Every business has to build great unit economics to grow quickly. In order to do that really well with a great client experience, you have to build the economics around that experience and around the execution of the output you have to provide. And when you can combine those really, really well, that's when you can grow a really good product or service quickly.
Matt, you're a recovering lawyer. I'm, I guess, still not recovered. Just an active lawyer providing, probably, less than optimal customer service. Do you have a background in accounting as well? Because, I don't meet a lot of lawyers in the accounting space.
No, and I'm more of a tech entrepreneur than I am an actual attorney. No, they don't even give me access to my own QuickBooks at Decimal. I just get the reports that they send me. So one of the greatest gifts I give our clients is that I will never touch their accounting.
Oh, I like that. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Then, this is, in this podcast, we talk a lot about deals. So I would love to hear about, Decimal's kind of growth by acquisition and that process, which is all news to me because I wasn't in this space at that time.
So for us, we spent the first 2.5 years at Decimal growing completely organically. But one of the other really cool things about this space is there were 50,000 accounting firms or bookkeeping shops in the United States. That's a ton. That also means that there's a lot of opportunity to consolidate. And Sara, as you probably see, a lot of the consolidation in this space is more in the traditional accounting firm space. And it's not necessarily in the kind of bookkeeping or cloud accounting or operational accounting segment of the industry. And so for us, what that means is there are a lot of opportunities out there to find really amazing people that want to stop doing low-level work, want to focus on doing higher-level client experience, and want to join Decimal. And so for us, shocking to me that Daniel found us through competitive analysis, because we really flew under the radar pretty good for a couple of years. And then we did find some amazing venture partners in Arthur Ventures. And through that, it built us up a war chest of capital to start making acquisitions. And the first one happened entirely by happenstance. It was not something that we were seeking out at the time, but we got a call from KPMG. And KPMG had also heard of us. In this case, it was because we had started hiring some of their employees. Ooh. And we had also started bringing on some of their bigger clients. And so they basically said, hey, would you like to just take it all? And so it worked out great. They were amazing partners, but we bought KPMG Spark from KPMG. So the story around that is 3 years prior to that, and that was August of 22, I think. Prior to that, 3 years before, they had bought a company called Bookly out of Salt Lake City. And Bookly was a combination of tech company and services. And shocking, a bookkeeping company for very small companies didn't fit with multi-billion-dollar KPMG. And as they decided they wanted to figure out a good plan, cool thing for everybody was KPMG said, we want to find a great home for the people and for the clients. They didn't, I mean, it's no matter how big it was not of the type of size that was going to be more than a blip on the balance sheet for a KPMG.
Okay.
And so they took that kind of people first approach, and we ultimately went through that with them and acquired the company, KPMG Spark, from them. It was an amazing learning experience for us. It was our first of what is now 2 carve-outs.
What do you mean by that? 2 carve-outs?
A carve-out would be, so you can, when you do acquisitions, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can buy the entire business. You can do an asset purchase where you buy most of the business, but you kind of structure it differently. Or you can do a carve-out where you buy a portion of what is a larger company's business. We love carve-outs. And carving out from KPMG Spark was our first one. We bought what was a smaller business unit within KPMG, maybe about 30 plus employees, and a couple of hundred clients. We brought them into Decimal. So that was our first of what is now 2 carve-outs.
Kind of a revenue stream, very limited in scope asset purchase.
Correct.
I have a lot of smaller clients doing that because, somebody's offloading their 1040 practice or something. And, the risk, it's interesting because you have to run your cash flow analyses so differently, because you can't just say, well, it cost them this much to do this. It's very unclear what the overhead was. But for you were acquiring this revenue stream, kind of knowing what it would cost you to service it, I'd imagine. But what'd you learn through that experience? That's like, this is a crazy story. Like the fact that KPMG was like, hey, Decimal, you want this is unheard of. I've never heard anything like this in my life.
The way it went is they threw out a price. I threw out a much, much lower price. We met somewhere closer to me, but in the middle. And then we thought, hey, we're going to go through this 4 months of diligence, which we thought we'd get done in like 40 days, and close the deal. But kind of as you mentioned, Sarah, when you're doing any type of acquisition, and I would put this on if you're getting acquired or you're the acquirer, you have to do 2 different, I would say, large bucket things. One, build the equation for success. And that equation for success needs to be very non-malleable. It needs to be, what is this for success? What is my floor and what is my ceiling? And you need to make all decisions based on the floor. Minimum thing, what I pay, what I get, this has to be where it is. Worst case scenario planning, here's what I'm willing to pay. Best case scenario planning, maybe I pay a little bit more, but I bet on the worst case scenario. Yeah. And so you can build a lot of structures into deals, as you know. If you're getting acquired, it's the same type of thing. Here is the asset that I have. Here's the minimum I'm willing to receive for it. Here's the structure for which I'm willing to receive it. And you kind of go from there. And that equation is your balance of risk.
When I was young, growing up in Tennessee, we went to the auction every Saturday. And auctions are really exciting. And so you have to get really set on your max before you start bidding, because you'll get carried away in the journey of it.
It's like going to the grocery store hungry.
Yeah, it is. Like, so you really have to set that before you step into the auction. So in this case, you're talking about making your max limit based on, basically your minimally viable economic situation. Like, this is the minimum, and then not deviating from that. Did that come up in this 4 month diligence process? Were you retoggling terms, or?
No, what actually took this was the learning experience. When you're dealing with a corp dev group of a multi-billion-dollar company, diligence is less the financials of what you're getting. And by the way, there were plenty of surprises that came along, like $0 or $5 a month clients for tax and bookkeeping services, and everybody threw their favors into KPMG Spark. It was fun. But we also built the equation around that. We built our economic metrics around knowing that there was some portion of that existed. In that case, it was much more dealing with the legal side of things and having a 15-page final document turn into a 45-page final document. And that was a lot of the learning. But the other thing that we actually slowed down was the second bucket that I mentioned earlier, which is people. For us, I think one of the most underutilized and under-examined aspects of an acquisition is the culture fit of the people that you're bringing on, your ability to service the clients in whatever way, shape, and form you deem successful. And we actually demanded through the process, and KPMG was amazing in dealing with this, that we got to interview multiple times the entire employee base. And so we got to know them exceptionally well, run them through a hiring process. And we picked most people to come with us, but we did pick a few that we said they're just not going to be a good fit at Decimal. And so we didn't bring them on. And that made the acquisition and the transition of the acquisition so much better. And I will say, still to this day, they are the greatest cultural addition to Decimal. And they're an amazing group of people. They were also so ready to not be part of a billion-dollar company that it's been a really fun thing to have them as part of Decimal, growing into leadership at Decimal and management at Decimal, and all the different ways we've seen them grow as people and team members.
That firm culture and cultural assimilation is something Sara and we've been talking about a lot. So Sara, I'd love for you to ask some questions and talk about that more. But before we switch, really quick, I wanted to call this out because you mentioned the $0, $5 a month clients that you found. In your deal, what was the percentage of those? Because the reason why that jumps out to me is, like, as soon as you said that, I have a client and we signed on his wife's company and we just did it basically for free. It's the same type of business, and they're both real estate. So it was like a really easy tack on. But if somebody bought my firm, they may not know that they're not getting any revenue from that client.
Right.
Luckily for me, it's only one. But that's something I would love for people to understand, that you could be buying a client list, and if you don't have a breakdown of that client list, even if it's anonymized, you may be acquiring people you're serving for free. What was the percentage in your acquisition?
It was small. It was sub 5%. And look, for most of those, one of the things I talk about, and I've been talking a lot about, is every single person that starts a services business, accounting, law, doesn't matter, consulting, build it as if you're going to sell it. If you build it as if you're going to sell it, you will have great unit economics. You'll build balance better into your life. You'll build larger profits into your business. You'll also build better visibility into understanding your unit economics. It is okay to have that $0 client as Daniel. Like, you know the risks. But if Daniel's going to go 100x, that becomes bad revenue very quickly. And if you don't know where your bad revenue is, you don't know how to replace it with good revenue. And so building as if you're going to sell. Also, I guarantee Sara sees this all the time, where somebody wants to sell or somebody's about to buy, and the finances of even an accounting firm, because I've seen it, are a complete and utter dumpster fire. And that makes it so that A, you're going to lose money on the acquisition. B, you really have no idea how you're doing as a business other than what you're able to pay yourself. And so you don't understand viability in any way, shape, or form. And somebody like me that's coming in on an acquisition side, I'm going to de-risk myself a lot, either by spreading earnout or by decreasing cash, or hopefully for me, by both.
Well, while we talk about firm culture, I'm going to work on a proposal right now.
At least get them to cover your costs.
Talk a little bit about what unit economics are, if you don't mind.
People talk about top line revenue, how much money you're making, but that is way less important than what profit are you making for everything that you're doing. Not just the client as a whole, but each service within that client's scope of services. So if you're me and I'm doing bill pay, I'm doing payroll, I'm doing bookkeeping, and I'm doing tax, I can guarantee that I'm making the most money off of bill pay. It's my favorite service to offer. I'm making the least money off of tax because I want you to do it and I like the hook of it, but I'm willing to give you back a little bit of money on it. I understand the unit economics of each one of those things for each one of our clients, which allows me to then also understand the profitability of tax, the profitability of bill pay, bookkeeping, payroll, et cetera. And so those are the unit economics that you're understanding your contribution margin, your profit margin off of each individual thing that you're doing.
So are you guys time tracking?
No, I've never time tracked. I will probably starting this year, which is going to make me backtrack on some promises I made to some early employees. We're going to do it more as a rolling basis to truly get an understanding. But when you do fully top down and you break out the units and users of each thing, you don't need to necessarily time track to really get profitability.
We did time studies. We never did time tracking, but I always found unit economics to be difficult to really measure without that time data. So it's really interesting that you guys are, looking at that situation also.
When you decide to time track or to time study, you've added overhead just to accomplish and train on that. And so it's like this double-edged sword of, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Should I do it? Can I passively do it? So it's this constant give and take.
As a non-recovering lawyer who's deep in time tracking, as you can imagine, although I have tried to move to a lot of flat fees, so much of my life has been about tracking time. And I have been in very large law firms watching other people track time. And there's a level of subjectivity that comes in that people like to pretend is not the case. But I almost think that that's probably good. Like if a employee hates something, they're going to record every minute of it. And if they enjoy it, it might not get recorded. But perhaps that actually supports the unit economics, even if they're not based in the objective reality. I'm really interested in more about the things that you found out in this 4-month diligence process. I mean, seems like such a sweetheart deal. So I'm sure you weren't necessarily digging for dirt and thinking I might call this deal off, but you had to have learned some things that were surprising to you.
Well, those $5 clients were very surprising. Also learning some of the stuff they're doing for some of the bigger clients. The other thing that I thought was really amazing about how KPMG handled it was they allowed us to talk to the top 30 clients of the firm once we knew we were going to close. They set up calls with each one, and they wanted to give them a heads up so that it wouldn't get announced ahead of time. These are things that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for everybody, and there's a lot of trust built in. And it was kind of like KPMG's like, hey, we trust you guys because we could totally crush you. And that was fine with us. But that gave us a really good opportunity to start to learn about some of the out of scope things that they were doing for people. Kind of like you mentioned, the things that they liked doing that they weren't charging for and how they were doing it. The other thing that we started to learn, and you learn this in a lot of CPA type firms, is how many layers they build up under just the accomplishment of simple work. So somebody's doing it, somebody's reviewing it, somebody's reviewing the reviewer, somebody's finally sending the final reviewed work. And you've got like 4 or 5 steps that go up there, which all cost a lot of money, that is all getting written off. And so really understanding that. And then that allowed us to build a transition plan. So some of the delay too in that 4-month diligence was us building out a 8 to 12 month transition plan and taking the time to work with KPMG to make sure that all the T's were crossed and I's were dotted. Really, like for us, the financials are the financials. And that wasn't the hard part about diligence. The hard part about diligence was understanding what the team structure looked like then and what it was going to look like 6 months from then. what the client base looked like, when we were going to do pricing raises on those $0 clients or just fire them, what we were going to look at in terms of billings, how we were going to transfer billings. Like when you're dealing with a couple hundred clients, you have a lot of complexity that you need to build into a diligence process. And to me, people call it diligence. I call it diligence and transition building and planning. And it's not just the assessment of what is, but it's the assessment of what will be. And I actually focus more on what will be, because I know that there's going to be about 20 to 25% total shit that's going to fall out of any deal. So just build that into your equation. Use the time to spend on building the full transition plan, because you don't want to be the dog that caught the car. You don't want to close on that deal and say, hey, what now?
Well, and you were in such a good to level set, very uncommon for people to allow you to meet with the employees and the clients prior to closing. I certainly push for that when I represent buyers, and I am like, no way in hell when I represent sellers. So it's one of those areas where I am diametrically opposed, depending on, because as a seller, it's a huge risk. Then everybody knows you're, planning a transition. If the transition falls through, there's a lot of uncertainty and people just atrophy out. But they weren't worried about that.
It's a testament to the trust that was built. So was that trust inherent to the deal because KPMG is just so big, or what did you do differently with the people on the other side of the table to build that trust to allow that contact?
We did a lot. The first call that I had with KPMG's deal team, I went over Decimal's core values as a business and why it was important that the next steps in the process lived up to those values. Number one value we have is do the right thing. Sara, you mentioned that on the seller side, you don't let them talk to employees. Guess what? Those employees all know what's going on. So being transparent is usually better than not. Number two value we have is default to transparency. And I said, look, if we're going to do this, I don't want it to be a surprise for these employees. In fact, if you're going to do a deal with me, my number one requirement in diligence is I will talk to all of the employees. If you don't want to do that, great. It's not a good deal for us. We are totally out. The people are the most important part of any deal. Number two is the clients. Number one is the people. And I think a lot of people in deal making flip those, because the clients are driving the payment, although you can't do any of it without the people. So to me, it flips it on its head. And so that was a big part. Then another amazing testament to KPMG is, and everybody thinks when you're talking about dealing with KPMG, oh, they must be the big bad, billion-dollar company. And yes, there were certain parts of the legal agreements or the press release negotiations and all that stuff that were slightly insane. And Sara, I've got a fun story about my tongue-in-cheek writing into deal docs that I put in there that are now carrying over into Michael Best as our law firm. They're now standard deal docs include something that I put into this. Talking through all of that, doing everything with them. They also allowed us to bring in the original co-founders of the business to talk with them, to talk with the employees. And so we were able to wrap it into a lot of this is a people first movement for us. And that was pretty cool.
That's fantastic. I've gotten that feedback a lot this summer, specifically from folks who closed last summer. When I follow back up, is I didn't appreciate how significant the employee culture would be. And honestly, I don't have absent the ability to interview the folks like you had, it's a hard nut to crack in the diligence process, what the people are like, what the culture is until you're in it. You got to do a lot of that transitioning that happens after closing, before closing, which is great.
And we applied that same formula to our fact acquisition that we recently closed, which was, hey, we'll walk away if we can't do this stuff. We want to make sure that we know what we're getting on the people side. We understand client churn and all that stuff is going to happen, but what we don't want is we want people that want to join Decimal. As you know, when you're doing an asset purchase agreement, for the most part, it says, big paragraph says basically, see list on other page for assets being purchased. You also know that as attorneys, when somebody comes up and asks you for deal docs, you pull the last deal that you did as your template and you edit it to fit the next one. you may charge people for creating the whole document, and this may get bleeped out of it so that I'm stealing Sarah's trade secrets here.
No, I don't do it that way because the potential for holding over language that wasn't intentionally in there is so extreme. So I have a novella, like brand new documents every time, but I do such a specific thing that I can, I've got it like niched down to a specific template.
So a lot of law firms, though, may or may not do that. So I also know that they don't ever bring the appendices or lists with them to the next one. But I knew that the young associates viewing the set of documents the next time would read that first paragraph. So I wrote in there, in addition to the assets listed, the acquisition will also include 2 bright orange Buckley bicycles and an iron pig's head dinner bell. Because those are things that existed in the office that I wanted as trophies. And so those trophies were listed on the actual deal docs. And we argued for 2 days back and forth with KPMG that I wanted it included on the deal docs and not in the appendices.
I had an asset purchase agreement once where it was a seller of a bakery. And one of the things we negotiated was that the seller got free baked goods once daily, with a coffee, one daily for the rest of the life.
You can contract for a lot of things.
I like that. So you got those were your deal toys?
My kids love the bike. Actually, my daughters hate it. My son thinks it's hilarious. But yeah,
That's so cool.
Overall, it was great. And it was a learning experience dealing with a large corp dev team. And every deal is different in who you deal with. Ironically, I prefer deals that have lawyers in them.
We're a delight. Everyone says, oh, it's not a party until multiple lawyers.
I love this. I love how sometimes we have a broker on as a guest, and they say no attorneys in the deals, and then we have attorneys that are like, please, always. And so I love to hear that from you, Matt, a professional deal maker, multi-time deal maker. So attorneys can be good.
I think they are. Brokers, haven't done a deal with a broker yet, but I'll reserve judgment for the first time.
Oh, the day is young. If you would like to find the next acquisition for Decimal, we can set up another call.
No, that's all right. I've talked to all of them, and I love talking to them because I do think there's a lot of opportunity in this space, and these will not be our last acquisitions.
Second only to, like, if you ever were looking at a target where they would not allow you to interview the employees, is that just a deal killer for you?
It is.
Now, is that, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I must know, is that because you just have no scarcity mindset in this and there's so many opportunities out there, or because Decimal just truly doesn't need to acquire to grow?
Those are all factors, but the main thing is we are a people first, and the people are the most important thing, and our culture at Decimal is the most important thing. And I am not going to sacrifice our culture for growth.
When you do interview the employees, how are you able to get a sense of that culture? Because, I mean, people don't come in being like, oh, this boss is terrible. And
we're getting to know them as a person. We're interviewing them like we were hiring them. We're not necessarily interviewing them on what's the firm like and how are you doing this. We're interviewing them as if they had applied for a position at Decimal. And so we run them through that similar application process. And part of that is aptitude. Like, we want to understand what their abilities are. Part of it's culture fit. And so we run them through like a 2 to 3 interview process to determine, would we hire this person? If so, why? Would we not? If not, why not?
That's rigorous. So what is your percentage of folks that you bring over?
95%. I mean, it's really got to be a bad fit.
What type of acquisitions are you guys looking at now? You really got kind of trial by fire with this huge KPMG thing somewhat dropped in your lap, and you got this great experience and the bicycle and the trophy.
Yeah, and I even got like a skateboard deck that says KPMG Spark that I have in my office.
How do you follow that up? I mean, are you just...
So we closed on an acquisition about a month and a half ago. Facta is a FP&A software company out of San Francisco that had a bookkeeping and financial operations business unit. And similar to KPMG, they called us and asked if we would be interested in acquiring it. And so we just acquired that about a month and a half ago. And so that was our second carve-out acquisition. We're actively looking for deals in a couple of different spaces right now. One, if it is in the kind of cloud accounting space, or a a firm that can service or does service its clients entirely remotely, that is somebody we'd be willing to acquire. We want people that want to join Decimal, less so people that are retiring and want to leave their firm. And I think there are a ton of those types of businesses that are out there. We also work with other bigger firms, and as they make acquisitions, there are pieces of what they acquire that aren't the perfect fit for that larger firm. A lot of these bookkeeping of kind of the sub 10 grand a month bookkeeping doesn't fit in with a top 50, top 100 accounting firm. And what they found is they've never been able to spin it off. They have to keep it. They have a talent shortage. So we're working with a bunch of those on carving out those parts of the acquisition and bringing them onto Decimal's platform. So for us, I think there's a lot of growth. We'll probably do 10x the revenue over the next 3 or 4 years. I think there's a lot of room to become the first 100 million, 150 million top line revenue in just the bookkeeping and tax space.
So fully remote, must be able to interview all of the employees. What's the rest of your deal box in terms of the deal you're looking for? Is there certain revenue or profit constraints you have to what you're looking for?
They don't have to be fully remote. They just have to service their clients fully remotely or have that ability. I don't want anybody dropping off a shoebox of receipts because, quite frankly, I don't have an office for them to do that. Also, that's really dumb if you're still doing it. So being able to service remotely. KPMG Spark had an office. We have since shut it down, but we're okay if they have an office. And then from a growth perspective, we prefer the 350, $500,000 and above. And there's really not a top line size that we wouldn't do. And so for us, it's just about acquiring the right size at the right time for our business. But at 82 people already, there's a lot that we can tuck in that won't dramatically affect culture. But what I see a lot of businesses in this space, and I think you're going to see it in the PE space where they've been doing a lot of roll-ups, at some point you get indigestion. And so you have to be careful about not doing too much and acquiring too much at once.
Oh, I love that. Indigestion. That's great.
Even with that in mind, with your deal size you're looking for, it sounds like growth by acquisition is going to be a major part of Decimal's future.
I think it will be. We also are doing a really great job of organic growth as well. And so if you can do that 50-50, 60-40, that's amazing. We already, I think, set the standard for organic growth for tech-enabled services businesses in the space. And I think we can reset it again.
What an interesting start to acquisition.
Oh, it was, we're doing this. I called my co-founder. We had a conversation and we decided, we're doing this. And then we looked and we're like, all right, now that we're doing this, we probably ought to hire somebody to run it. And we hired a guy named Michael O'Connor, who's been a tech CEO for a couple of different companies. And he's now our COO of Decimal. And we feel like we have the leadership team to really grow even faster than we have been a lot over the next few years.
That's incredible. I anticipate, or at least I hope, be optimistic here, that we have many more conversations about Decimal and Matt, your progress. I mean, you are the best example of a deal maker I can imagine. So I love sharing you with our community and our audience, and I hope we have a good long relationship having you on as a repeat guest. How can people find you? How can they learn more about you, learn more about Decimal, and ultimately work with you guys? Like, what would you like them to know?
Honestly, follow me on LinkedIn. Connect. I love connecting with people. We're starting to get more into this space. I'd love to just talk to people. If anybody would like to talk about joining the team, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation. But honestly, we are about leveling up the space. And hey, one of the fun things we'll release later this year is we're gonna do a lot to be on the very front end of the accounting industry when it comes to the adoption and usage of AI. And I think that's going to help with the acquisition strategy, growth strategy, and then creating best in market internal economics.
That's awesome. For those listening to deal makers that aren't buying accounting practices, there's a lot of folks out there that are buying businesses and have no idea how they're going to get their bookkeeping and their accounting done after they make an acquisition. Who's a great client?
Really, anybody doing about $500,000 or more in revenue. We do a lot of focus on professional services, home services, and construction. But with my background, we also have a ton of tech companies and, ironically, law firms. Lawyers are super fun clients when it comes to negotiating terms of service, addendums, and stuff like that. But we'd love to help. We want to make it so they can focus on what they do best, and we can take the stuff they don't like.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Do you guys do you have a referral program?
We do have a referral program. I will absolutely talk to you about that referral program.
Meta, I think you're supposed to wait.
Referral program.
Aren't you supposed to wait till you stop recording to ask that question? That's how we do it here. We share all the details.
No, being a good partner in an ecosystem involves more than just being a good person.
You've had so many good sound bites.
Somebody's media trained.
Oh, not at all. My team hates it. Literally, my chief of staff texts my wife that Matt has a podcast today. Please make sure he's matching.
So you mentioned the podcast. Where can people find your podcast?
So podcast is called After the First Million. And we talk a lot about there are a couple of stages to business. One is when you just kind of start and you have an idea. And then at some point you reach kind of that first million. And it's like, oh shit, I have to build a real business. And that's the messy middle. And so we talk a lot about that and the emotions of running a company and how hard it is and how fun it is and how isolating it can be. And so we talk a lot about that.
After the First Million, and people can find that podcast on the podcast platforms or on YouTube? Where can they
all
find
podcast platforms, YouTube, decimal.com. We make it easy to find.
There you go. Decimal.com if you're making over $1 million or over $500,000, or you're acquiring a company that's over $500,000, decimal.com. And if you want a good friend, Matt Tait on LinkedIn. This has been episode 16 of the Dealmakers Podcast, featuring Matt Tait, the CEO of Decimal Dealmaker. So much value in this episode. If you got that value, please like and subscribe. If you want to learn more, comment wherever you're seeing this, and Matt's links will all be in the show notes. So thanks for listening.
Big, I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids. That's wealth years and years. Promise my brother soon as he out to finish this bid, we finna do it bigger than